Good afternoon, everybody, particularly the virtual audience. And I'm very happy that so many have logged in. And I wish to thank Dr. Vidya Ramkumar and the Dean Research for having me here in Ramachandra Medical College. This presentation is essentially going to be something very, very personal, which is not the type of talk one normally gives in a scientific community. However, I believe that it will be easier for most of you, the physical audience and the virtual audience, to relate to what happened in real life. So this is not a cut and paste job. This is not taking from various learned, erudite discourses and giving, but it's telling you sharing with you what I personally did and what I lament so many decades later of not having done. And I hope you do not make the mistakes which I probably made. To an audience like this, probably it's not required, but nevertheless, what do you mean by research? Research is a quest for knowledge. Every word here is important. A quest for knowledge through diligent search of investigation or experimentation. The scientific method is a systematic body of procedures and techniques applied in carrying out investigation or experimentation. Research and scientific methods may be considered a critical inquiry. This need not necessarily lead to a discovery of fact or information. What is important is the methodology which we use, and this is much more important. Now, I am going to confine myself to clinical research. I am a pseudoscientist. I'm not even a pseudoscientist. I don't think I can even call myself a scientist just because I have a PhD. The world was totally different in the 20th century, as I will tell you now. So I am not going to talk about laboratory research. I am not going to talk about medical research scientists as such, but I'm going to share with you what I learned as a clinician, as one involved in the practice of neurosurgery, and how I could have had several opportunities which could have translated into outstanding, excellent clinical research, and how I missed these opportunities and what were the lessons I learned. We never agree on, let us take the data, we will see what can be done with it. That is not the right approach. The fundamental approach is have a researchable question. Have a question for which you seek the answer. What is the answer is not important, but how you get the answer is what is very critical. And today in 2022, we obviously need to play considerable importance on ethics and of course, safety in research. Ethical practice, data interpretation and documentation is vital. There can be no research unless you have data. Today we talk of big data, data analytics. The data analytics is no good unless the quality of the data which you have acquired is absolutely perfect. So these are some of the fundamental points. The first thing is identifying a problem. I have been a member of the Department of Science and Technology Program Advisory Committee for 4 years, and after that, for the last 3 years, I've been associated with the Department of Biotechnology Industry Research Assistance Council. I often feel that the proposals which are submitted to the committee for evaluation, all submitted by outstanding, smart, brilliant young entrepreneurs, startup companies with fire in their belly, absolutely amazing. Unfortunately, I get that nasty feeling. I've never been a diplomat in my life, which I've told them point blank. Sometimes I get the impression that these young men and women create a solution, develop a solution, and then go in search of a problem to find what is the problem where this solution can benefit. Yes, has to be commercially viable. A solution is not a solution unless it is universally available to anyone, anytime, anywhere. A solution is a prerogative of the elite and to Elon Musk and people of his cadre, obviously is not a solution. But please, when we talk of clinical research, I may be biased because I'm a clinician. When we talk of clinical research, you need to define a clinical problem and then go and try to identify or define what exactly is the problem, the subcomponents of the problem, and then develop a solution for this particular problem. Now, we all know that until very recently, it took 10, 15, even 20 years before a concept, the story from a lab to from the bench to the bedside, took 15 to 20 years before a drug went through all the various phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 and became clinically successful. Today, of course, with modern information and communication technology, and particularly thanks to the coronavirus, this has been absolutely changed. The vaccine has been developed within 12 to 18 months, what earlier on took 10 to 15 years. We are only 1 out of 10,000 scientific discoveries makes it to the market. So if your aim is to become an Elon Musk, forget about it. You are not, the clinical research is not for you. So one must be very clear about that. Now, a career path. Are you looking at clinical research as a job opportunity? Absolutely nothing wrong with that. So here we are not talking of medical doctors. We are not talking of physicians and surgeons who also want to contribute to healthcare by addressing fundamental problems. Here we are talking mainly of paramedics. We are also talking of medical scientists. I'm so happy an MD PhD program is very soon going to come to this country. So if you want to do that, as you can see on this slide, a clinical research is very attractive today as job opportunities are amazing. You will almost certainly get 100% placement if you do any of the clinical research programs now available in this country, not only for medical, but for pharmaceutical, project management, regulatory authorities, IP. BIRAC has got an entire section called intellectual property just to interpret intellectual property and also to talk about the various laws which occur when you are talking of clinical research across continents. So clinical research from a job occupation point of view, yes, I would strongly encourage people to do it. Now, I'm going to now become very personal, purely to convey a point. It was in 1964. I think there are very few people in this audience who were born, who were in this world at that particular time. When I was in 10th standard, I wrote an article on St. Bede's in 2064 AD. That was St. Bede's High School, was a school where I studied, 1964. Never in my wildest dreams, I let my imagination go riot. Never in my wildest dreams would I have thought that this article was considered good enough in 2021 by a well-known organization called Innova Space, one of the leading private organizations to promote space travel, and they reprinted this in one of their magazines. Now, again, I was kindled by space medicine when I presented a paper in Rio de Janeiro, where I met Professor Thais Rusumono, a woman doctor, MD, turned space scientist, who has been spending the last 2 decades on this. And again, it was my privilege to spend a full 12 hours at the Johnson Space Center, where I had the opportunity to interact not only with astronauts, but even with people in the ISS, International Space Station. You can see on the background, you can see a gentleman there, and I was even able to talk. One of the great moments of my life, I was able to talk to somebody 240 kilometers above the Earth. This was what clinical research also means, meaning there is no point in knowing more and more about less and less. This is what specialization is. We should not become an ultra specialist. You need to know a little about everything, a little about IPL, a little about Bharatanatyam, a little about Kuchipudi, and that only will make you a better molecular biologist. If you confine yourself to a particular genomic structure of the female pregnant caterpillar, you may be the world's authority on that, but believe me, you will not get the whole picture. The big picture is very important. Again, you need to be slightly mad, slightly crazy. Otherwise, you are not going to progress in life. 4 years ago, I persuaded, perhaps my white hair also contributed to it, because most of them are far younger than me. I persuaded the editor of Neurology India, which is one of India's top 5 journals with an impact index of 2.95. Interestingly, there are very few journals in India with even such a low impact index. So I persuaded him to let me bring out a special edition on extraterrestrial neurosciences. Excepting the editor, who today is the director of Chitra Tirunal, incidentally, excepting him, everybody thought I'm absolutely bonkers. We don't even know about neurology in regular clinical practice, and here is this guy talking about neurological practice outside the earth. But interestingly, in the last 2.5 years, more than 4,000 downloads of every single paper published, about 14 papers were published in the special edition, and more than 60,000 times these papers have been downloaded. PubMed Index and Google Scholar has quoted papers from this journal at least 20 times. So this is what the world is all about. I was 17 years old at that time, and I produced a double-headed chick. At that time, you see, your world is totally different. And no less a person than Sir Lakshmana Swami Mudaliar, who was the Vice Chancellor of the Madras University for more than 30 years. He spent almost 15 minutes with us. And look at the top one, a PubMed Index journal, which I am a co-author, 1972. The effect of chloroquine on the survival of skin allografts in rats. Last year, the whole world was asking for chloroquine for the management of coronavirus when we did not know that much about corona. Friends of mine in the US wrote to me and said, we want chloroquine, it is not available here, can you please send it to us? 50 years later, the scientists showed that chloroquine has an immunosuppressive effect and perhaps can also be used in certain viruses belonging to the corona strain. So this was what we indirectly, remotely produced with the professor of pharmacology at that time, 50 years ago. And again, I wrote an article on rejection and immunosuppression. See, get your hands involved in everything. And this again got the first prize in the final year MBBS competition in the whole of India by the Tuberculosis Association of India. My first entrance to research probably was for the National Science Talent Award. Unfortunately, I just don't remember the exact project I worked on. There was no 12th standard at that time. It was called pre-university, equivalent to 12th standard. And this was what was done. As an MBA student, every year we participated in the Madras Science Association and got the first prize in life sciences every year from the second year to the final year. And I had the privilege of meeting Mrs. Indira Gandhi, the Prime Minister of India, who spent about 4 to 5 minutes in my stall. I represented Tamil Nadu at the National Science Fair. I took 12 white mice. Now, retrospectively, I don't know where I had the audacity to do that, but I took 12 white mice in 2 cages in a third-class sleeper compartment in the Grand Trunk Express, 1972. 42 hours to travel from Madras to Delhi. As you can guess, the ticket checker came and said, rats are not allowed. I told him it's not a rat, it's a white mice used in laboratory experiments. And then he said, you have to get down now in the next station and all that. I just dropped names. I said, do you know who is the chief guest? The Prime Minister of India. I was 19 years old at that time. What's your name? Do you want me to report you to the Prime Minister of India that you're preventing somebody from Tamil Nadu, representing Tamil Nadu, etc.? Just everything, he could have thrown me out physically. Somehow he fell for it, and I was able to take these 12 white mice to Delhi with skin grafts done on these white mice. Then again, you can see here, when I was a when I was a postgraduate in neurosurgery, it is a 5-year career, 1975 to 1980. Incidentally, I had the distinction, I don't know that the record has been changed now. I was formerly a student of the Madras Medical College for 16 years consecutively without failing. There are a lot of people who have been students of MMC for 10, 15, 20 years, in fact, but I have not failed even once. 6.5 years MBBS, 5 years MCS neurosurgery, and another 5 years a PhD in neurosurgery. So when I appeared for my Viva Voce at this end of the 16th year and paid the examination fees, it so happened that the name of the clerk in the examination fees, the guy who took it in Madras Medical College also was Ganapathy, and he had joined the MMC as a clerk when I joined as a MBBS student. With a look of absolute pathetically, he said, "Innuma mudikala neenga innum fees kattinde irukengala," he said. Of course, I didn't tell him that this was a different exam. But this was a thrill, the excitement of being a student for 16 years in the Madras Medical College. So you can see here. Now, this was what, in fact, I was telling Vidya about this just when we were having lunch. See, you can see this book. It's more than, in fact, my daughter used to say, "Where is that talahani? Where is that pillow so that I can use it as a pillow?" This was what we produced. Professor Kalyan Raman, my teacher, my mentor, my guru, he was the editor of the book. There were 4 of us who were called associate editors. Of course, I was the youngest among them, and naturally 90% of the work fell on me. And you won't believe it, but at that time there was no PubMed, there was no Google, there was no Gmail, WhatsApp, nothing. Computers were just come. Madras Medical College, Government General Hospital did not have a single computer. There was absolutely no computer. There was a typewriter, which was what I used. So my boss said, I will give you Journal of Neurosurgery, I will give you Journal of Neurology, Neurosurgery, Psychiatry, etc. You read every single article and you make your own abstract out of it. I thought, oh, big deal, what a big deal I did. I never realized what I was in for. I realized it too late. Of course, it was supposed to be shared by all 4 of us, but the other 3 were already associate professors, so there's no way that they would be able to do it. And then he also asked me to prepare the index for the abstracts. So understand, there's no computerization, there was no control F, there was nothing I can do to search. Every single thing was done manually. And then I said, Alzheimer's disease, these are the page abstract number, etc., etc. But it was a tremendous lesson, absolutely a fantastic lesson. And this was what we did. So this was all what made us interested in clinical research. As you get older and when you are no longer in active clinical practice, when you have a little time also, so I decided, let me put all these thoughts together, and along with 3 of my friends, 5 of my colleagues, we had formed a society called Society for Medical Learning and Resources Transfer. 1982, we started this. 2 of my friends who were in the US had come back, American board certified. So a hospital in the US was put up for sale. So my class senior, 1 year senior to me, so he bought the entire library for $200. He had it shipped. It took 6 months to reach India, but nevertheless, we got a lot of journals, books, etc. So we wrote our entire story on what we did in the 1980s. And I was very surprised when the Journal of the Medical Library Association, with a very good PubMed index impact factor, immediately accepted it, not a single change. And this was published a few months ago. I want to spend a few minutes on how I went through my PhD. It may not be relevant at all today, but I think the message is what is important. Now, at that point of time, as I said, I don't know the present rules, but in 1985, there was a government, I was an assistant surgeon in the Madras Medical Service at that time. There was a government of Tamil Nadu rule which said you cannot register for a PhD unless you work in the primary health center for a minimum period of 3 years. I had already qualified as a neurosurgeon. There were not enough MCH neurosurgery working as tutor in neurosurgery in the neurosurgery department. And when I went to the DMA said, you don't fulfill the rules. Then the head of the department of neurosurgery said, it's an MCH neurosurgery. If you ask him to go to a primary health center, there'll be an MBBS in his place who can't open the skull and all that. But DMA said, nothing doing, these are the rules. So it took me 2 years repeatedly going to the health secretary, waiting outside the health secretary's office. Health secretary said, a new GO has to be issued. I don't have the authority. You need to meet the minister. And of course, every time I got an appointment to see the minister, I was sitting outside. I wouldn't be called in. I had a book in my hand, so I was able to read. I think out of sheer disgust, he wanted to get rid of me. So one day he asked his secretary, who is this person I'm seeing here, sitting here for the last 2 weeks? Who is it? What is it he wants? I went at the minister. I said, sir, this is thing. This is what I want to do. I think just to get rid of me, he said, okay. He called his PA and the GO was passed saying as a special, not to be quoted as a precedent, Dr. Ganapathy is allowed to register for a PhD. 2.5 years to get permission to register for a PhD. I went back full of, halo around my head, absolutely thrilled, went to the DME. DME got very angry, Director of Medical Education, because I went above his head and got it from the Health Minister. With next day, he had me transferred from Madras Medical College to Stanley Medical College. There was no CT scan in Stanley Medical College. My PhD thesis was about a CT scan, a mathematical method of diagnosing brain tumors. Again, I wrote letter after letter after letter and said I may be permitted to work in Madras Medical College after working hours without detriment to my primary duty, etc., etc., etc. 6 months later, I managed to get transferred to Madras Medical College. Next 4 years, I spent there and I put it. This was going on. So at last, I managed my thesis, everything. And then with a lot of happiness, I went to submit the 5 physical copies. And then to my horror, the clerk looked at it, opened it. You can see the thesis here. The clerk looked at it, opened it, and said he will not accept it. He said, why not? He said, this does not fulfill regulation 13.2, class 3, page so-and-so of this thing. He said, this is not typed. I thought I will get kudos on my back for being the first thesis submitted in the University of Madras in 1989 with a computer-generated printout. I got everything printed on a dot matrix printer. The clerk said the rules very clearly say double-spaced typed report. This is not typed. I cannot accept it. This was the rule at that time. Okay, having come this far, I had no intention of giving up. I tried to get an appointment with the controller of examinations, assistant registrar. VC would no way see me. VC secretary would not see me. But I managed to get it as a very special case, etc. They accepted. So this was what? For those 4 years, I had only one reason for my existence, to get those 3 letters after my name. I never knew who my children were because I used to leave home at 6 in the morning. Please understand, I was an assistant surgeon working in Government General Hospital and with a little private practice because my salary at that time was 7,000 rupees a month total, including DA, HRA, CCA, LTC, everything put together. So I had to do private practice to make at least another 7,000, 8,000, 15,000, 20,000 a month. So with all this, doing a PhD was absolutely madness. But that was what I wanted. And those 3 letters after my name. Today it looks so silly, maybe perhaps it looks ridiculous, but maybe perhaps not all that silly because it totally changed my life. Now, why I became a neurosurgeon, this is very, very personal, but nevertheless, I think it's important. When I was in 11th standard, I lost my elder brother in a head injury, no helmet at that time. That minute I decided I'm going to become a doctor. I became a doctor. As a 4th year MBBS student, my eldest brother also met with a head injury, again without a helmet. So I decided that minute to become a neurosurgeon. For my parents, it was devastating to have lost 2 grown-up sons. I have one brother who's in the US. So if I also go abroad, they would be devastated. So that's why I decided to stay back. So then I spent all my time in trying to make helmets mandatory because of the strong emotional reason. As Secretary, Neurological Society of India, I got permission from the general body to implead the NSI as a co-respondent in a public interest litigation. And I argued I presented a case before a division bench of the Madras High Court. Thanks to my PhD training, I read up every possible paper published on helmets with solid evidence. The judges were extremely nice. They said, how much time do you want? How long do you want? I said, sir, Your Honor, ideally I would like 45 minutes. They said, please go ahead. And you won't believe it, I gave a lecture to 2 judges, the division bench, quoting left and right from Taiwan, that thing, this thing. They had no question to ask. Next day, before the judgment was pronounced, the public prosecutor was also there. He apparently must have got the message. The government passed the rule stating that Section 136 of the Motor Vehicles Act should be implemented with effect from tomorrow. So the whole thing became null and void, infructuous as you call it, because the government had already passed the order. Now, why am I mentioning this? Retrospectively, if I had stayed on this, if I had continued to work only on helmets for the next 40 years, probably I would have become the world's authority on helmets and this thing. No, that was something which, from a clinical research point of view, though I had an interest, though I had some knowledge, etc., I did not persist with it. So lesson number 1, if you need to get passionate about something, persist with it. You are not going to reach the top in 2-3 years. It may take 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, but persist with it. So after a few years, having achieved what I wanted, see, I set very low goals. You need to raise the bar. Never be satisfied with what you have. So these are the lessons. Then again, because of my very close association with head injuries, etc., and I was a consultant in Apollo hospitals. The first 5 years, I was the only neurosurgeon, so every single case of head injury was admitted under me. I got involved in brain death, and the first 100 brain deaths in Tamil Nadu was entirely certified by me. I promoted this, etc., published several papers, viewing the critically ill head trauma patient as an organ donor, and so on. Again, I did not persist on that. Stereotactic radiosurgery was what I started. You can see in 1995, at that time, I fixed a stereotactic frame in Tenampet, and 4 kilometers across Mount Road. I used to take the patient with the stereotactic frame to Greaves Road, where the angiogram was there, the angiography suite. We did not have an angiography suite in Tenampet. We had it only in Greaves Road, and that is where we did. So every single patient, though I was a so-called senior consultant by that time, every single patient I would go personally, because even if there's a 2 millimeter variation in the frame, my entire results would go forward. So this was what we did. And you can see on the top there's a mouse trap, 1997. At that point of time, we were the only ones in India to have this amazing treatment planning system at that time. And one day, 1997, something happened, it didn't come through. We had no idea what happened. Patient already had a stereotactic frame in the head. Several hours later, we realized that a cable was cut because a rat had bitten the cable. Now, I thought I was fairly smart. So in spite of taking into account various variables, generator, backup power, UPS, this, we never realized that there could still be rats in Apollo Cancer Hospital. I mean, one of the leading institutions. So we got a rat trap. Of course, I was able to convince the purchase officer, and we got an electronic rat trap. Some days later, see, with progression, with increase in technology, obviously, I also have to keep this thing. Now, this is the thing which I lament most about. If I could kick myself, or everybody around here, if you could kick me, I would be happy to take that kick. More than 600 cases of cerebral arteriovenous malformations I had personally treated. All I had to do was to take 3 ml of blood from each one of them, because AVMs do not require a tissue diagnosis. You don't have to physically operate on them. An angiographic diagnosis is absolute evidence. And most of these people would come accompanied by their children or parents or something. Theoretically, I could have got blood from the relatives, etc. I did try. It is not that I did not try. I wrote letters, I asked. But then in 1997, maybe now retrospectively, I could have slept 1 hour less. If I had slept 1 hour less, I would have got 360 hours every year. 10 years, I would have got 3,600 hours. In the 3,600 hours, I could certainly have achieved much more. But I was not that smart, that good as to give up my sleep by 1 hour, which is all that I had to do. So though this funding was required, I just couldn't do it. Of course, I published 2-3 papers, but that was about all. So 600 cases of cerebral arteriovenous malformation. If I had been maybe in the United States, or if I had been in a university like this, all said and done, I was working in a corporate hospital. If I had been working in a university hospital, we could not only have brought out monographs, but we could have followed up every one of these 6 cases. I mean, I would have contributed enormously to find out what is the effect of the treatment. I was so happy today when Dr. Vidya was taking me around to see that the world has changed completely. Of course, you are a university, that goes without saying, but I was so happy to see that what we could not do earlier on, most of you have now started doing it. This was again the radio surgery which I was talking about. Now, Dr. Ramurthy, my teacher, always used to say, the higher your formal university education, the less common sense you have. And I don't think he is wrong. The higher and higher, more papers you publish, the more letters after your name, common sense takes a beating completely. Because he had drilled it into our head, I said, no, whatever be my this thing, let me have common sense. 1998, I got interested in telemedicine. There's been no looking back from then at all. And here you can see what looks ridiculously simple. This Philips, the first hospital on wheels in India in 2001, I don't remember, 2001 or 2002 in Madurai. We spent all our time designing the interior of this hospital on wheels. We looked at their microbiology section, this, everything. But of course, my only consolation was that senior directors of Indian Space Research Organization also were as stupid as I was. So that was my only consolation. Nobody looked at the height of the VSAT. And nobody took measurements of the branches of trees in the villages to which this would go. This was primarily meant not for the big cities. This was to go into rural India. So when this van went, it was inaugurated, big fanfare, ribbon cutting, everybody was clapping each other. And then when the first village it went to, the branch of the tree, I had two choices. One, to get a ladder, cut every branch of every tree and take this van along, which obviously is not possible. And then we realized that very hard. So what happened? The branch hit that. And it just turned about 2.5 inches. That is all. 2 centimeters. But when the apogee, as you call it, turns by 2 centimeters, signals are not received and we were unable to transmit. So this was a lesson we learned. We communicated this, and there was no way I could get a technician who knows about VSAT. Nobody is available in the open market. So we had to get them from Bangalore ISRO, permission from that person, this person. It will take months. So today, Shankar Netralia, probably Ramachandra also, today the VSAT satellite has been reduced in size tremendously. So this was a lesson we learned in the real world. So what is the message? You cannot learn swimming through a postal course. That is the most important thing. You have got to get into the water. You have got to drown. You have got to sink. That's the only way you can learn. You cannot learn swimming through a postal course. So just because you're a PhD doesn't mean anything. You must actually go down and see what is happening. So with this background, Ericsson asked us to test 3G. Today, 5G is going to become operational in a few months from now, about 12 or 15 years ago. 3G, Ericsson got a special permission from the telecoms ministry for testing, edge as you call it. And so they asked me to do a clinical trial to send ECGs, to send blood pressure, auscultation, respiratory sounds, heart sound through wireless technology. You remember this was 12 years ago. Again, I spent a lot of effort and time. I wanted to be perfect, etc., etc. I even spoke to the assistant engineers in Madurai. I spoke to everybody, checked everything possible I thought I did. But I did not ask about the health of the mother-in-law of the assistant engineer. This was done on a Sunday, because that is the only day where we could get all these people. I literally fell at the assistant engineer's feet, said, "Sir, please be there on Sunday. You have to this thing." He said, "Yes." I thought I was very smart, but I never found out about the risk factors of the mother-in-law of the assistant engineer. She died, assistant engineer left, power failure, and I was prepared for many things. So I had got diesel. I had got enough diesel for a 3-hour backup, but the entire thing failed. So at 11 o'clock, no power. I've already got 100 patients to be tested. I got 50 nurses, 3 doctors. Everything had been arranged. And I was just determined not. This was done in a village, because that's why we wanted a real village. The nearest availability of diesel was on a Sunday. Shops are not open. Nearest availability of diesel was 4 hours ago. I had 1 or 2 excellent assistants to help me. So put them there, told them to find out where is this diesel guy, go to his house, pay him double the money, get the lock, open it, etc. That would take another 3 hours. I can't wait. So what did I do? We had Apollo hospitals. We had 2 big vans there, an ambulance, etc. No, they run in diesel. So I went there, got hold of it. You can see this guy taking out all the diesel from the Apollo hospital's bus and the van, etc. That gave us enough diesel. We bought time for about 2 to 3 hours, by which time we got the diesel again, and we did every single case we did. Now, this is what is required. The absolute determination not to take no for an answer. Whether you're a PhD student, whether you're a postdoc, whether you're a professor, whether you're a dean, vice chancellor, whatever it is, the decision not to take no for an answer. This is another thing you can see, 2001, October 2001. I don't know whether this video will play. I am not sure. Now, this was again a golden opportunity I lost. Subsequently, I've been reviewing the literature. I'm not able to find a single published paper on pediatric echocardiograms being done at 200 miles distance. Prem Shekhar, a pediatric cardiologist, had just returned from the UK. He got infected with my contagious enthusiasm. He followed in my footsteps, and more than 200 pediatric echocardiograms he supervised and got it done by a non-trained technician in the village of Aravanda. And we got all this. Unfortunately, we just didn't have the time, or maybe not that much of interest or passion to publish this. We didn't publish this, nothing happened. Today, of course, is just history as it is. So my philosophy has been, even if you dabble in clinical research, a little of everything. You have three choices before you. You can be a full-time clinical researcher, maybe join Ramachandra or All India Institute, full-time, have papers, textbook, this, attend conferences, etc., etc. But take the bus, as somebody said this morning, I don't want to mention the name, you may not even have enough money to admit your children in a private medical college. Or you can be entire private practice, make a lot of money, never have attended a single conference in your life, not even be a member of a professional society. That option is always there. My philosophy right from my youth was to have a little of everything. I had a little private practice. I made enough money for a comfortable living. I had a few papers, publications, a PhD if you want to call it, a little this thing. I'm not a full-time academician as such. So you need to decide early in life, what is it you want? You want a little of everything. Family life, that is equally important, particularly nowadays. You spend all your time in the laboratory. Yes, you'll get 2 more papers, but your children, you may not have grandchildren at all for that matter, and your children may not even recognize you. So you need to decide what is it you want in life, and that is important. One lesson which I learned I've attended 4 courses in IIM. So one of the courses, what struck me in my head was, what got you there will not keep you there. I think this is a fantastic statement. I did my PhD on a mathematical method of diagnosing brain tumors using Hounsfield units. Hounsfield units disappeared after 5 years. Today, that subject itself doesn't exist. Telemedicine now has become so common. So you need to go to the next step. You need to be ahead of the curve. You need to be future ready. This is the most important thing. Today, artificial intelligence is what everybody is talking about. So you need slowly to branch off into this. I just put up this slide. There were 43 proposals here. Just to tell you, all these proposals are amazing proposals, but they just have no clinical material in them. So again, I beseech all of you, I'm sure many of you are doing projects, etc. Please get a clinician involved, not after the prototype is developed, but at the conceptual stage. They have had several proposals from IITs, for example, where, you need to accept the fact that you are an audiologist, you are an engineer, you are a technologist, you know everything about it, but you don't directly deal with patients as an MBBS medical doctor does. I have to accept the fact that I just don't know enough about artificial intelligence. I can drop some words, artificial neural network, deep learning, machine learning. I mean, that can impress somebody, but I just don't know enough. So I need to get everybody. So multidisciplinary, collaboratory support is very, very important. This again is going to be the future. Augmented reality, virtual reality, extended reality, mixed reality, augmented virtual reality, and so on and so forth. The metaverse, which is a term given to a conglomeration of all this, this is going to be the future. I am absolutely sure in my lifetime, teleconsultation is not going to be video conferencing. Teleconsultation is going to use a digital twin. Digital twins are already available in the automobile industry. They have made tremendous advances, and I foresee that my avatar, with the Ayushman Bharat coming up in a very big way, I foresee that my avatar is going to be there in a hologram, virtually in a 3D. 5 feet 10 inches height, 77 kilograms weight, 71 years old, BP so much, blood sugar so much, this, every single event in my life from the day I'm born till now is going to be available in the digital world. Now, just imagine Multiply this by 7 billion times. Okay, that's not going to happen. Multiply it by 100 million times. If you have the data of 100 million people, right from their audiogram to their visual acuity, field to their mental IQ, to every single thing under the sun, and if this data is available to anyone, anytime, anywhere, of course, anonymous, etc., 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 I believe that in the future, a medical doctor is not going to examine the patient. A medical doctor is going to examine the data. He is going to look at the data, because imagine if every single COVID-19 patient affect positive in the whole world. If they're in India, forget the whole world. In Tamil Nadu, if everybody's data in Tamil Nadu was pooled into one common area, there will be patterns. I may not be intelligent enough to recognize a pattern, but my AI-based engineer will definitely be able to recognize a pattern, and he will be able to make an algorithm. Again, Bangalore is very close by. The COVID has postponed it. I was in a way partly associated with this. I was the only medical doctor who gave a talk at the symposium on human spaceflight exploration. No less a person than the Minister of State for Space, Jitendra Singh, announced that India's first space station is going to be there in 2030. Maybe it'll get delayed 1 or 2 years, but that is going to happen. These are just some books printed, papers published, etc. Now, for someone, this slide is not meant to show off. That is not the intention at all. But the intention is to show that for somebody working in a dividend declaring company, a for-profit corporate hospital, again this morning we had a difference of opinion, for a corporate hospital, dividend declaring company, it is possible for an individual to publish papers, to write chapters in books, etc., etc., etc. It ultimately depends on how badly you want something. If I wanted that PhD very badly, I gave up everything for those 4 years. Similarly, if you want badly, it depends on how badly you want something, you will definitely be able to get it. Again, you need to be future ready. You can see how digital health trends are totally changing. I'm sure you have a simulation center here also. A couple of weeks back, I visited the Apollo Hospital Simulation Center. I was not even aware that this was available, and it was absolutely amazing to see how everything can be simulated. And I think this is a good area for research. I'm going to spend the last part of my talk on a slightly different part. At the end, people, fortunately or unfortunately, judge you by the number of papers you have. That is mandatory, compulsory at all national institutes today. In fact, All India Institute has got 10 full professors, 7 associate professors, and 2 assistant professors. Whereas in my time, it was just the opposite. We were waiting for our bosses either to retire or for him to become physically incapacitated so that we would be promoted. The world has changed completely. Now, for you to have a paper published and indexed in an indexed journal, you need to understand that the whole thing is peer reviewed, and you need to understand what is the process. For the last 2-3 years, ever since I joined the semi-retired category, for some strange reason, every journal seems to know, and I get at least 1 paper to review every week, which takes a lot of effort and time, but I enjoy doing it and I learn a lot. So the peer review process has been in existence for a long time. I was surprised to read that in 1731, 300 years ago almost, the peer review process had already started, and you know all this, how it is happening. Now, the reviewer, I'm not going to spend too much time going through this. I'll just tell you why I got interested in this. I wrote a paper published in Neurology India on the peer reviewing process. I got mad. I got absolutely mad when one of my papers was rejected, which is fine. Several of my papers have been rejected. I never got mad. But this reviewer obviously had no idea what he was talking about. He rejected a paper on telemedicine. He rejected a paper on neuro-intensive care at the height of the pandemic, the second wave, when the world was totally different. I had given data on 78 patients with neurosurgical teleconsultations in 11 different ICUs spread across the country. And then the reviewer said the number is too small, that is not there, this is not, this is etc. So each and every point which he mentioned, I had to repudiate, I had to give data and to show that he was talking absolute nonsense. So in that, I also mentioned that for statistics depends on contextual. Sending one man to the moon and bringing him back is enough statistical evidence that man can go to the moon. But if I'm going to show that smoking produces cancer, I need 1 million people because there are 10,000 different variables. Similarly, at the height of the pandemic, if you can show that 10 people you have given intensive care consultation at the height of the pandemic, and that has created a difference in the healthcare outcome, that is enough evidence that further studies need to be done. So the main thing is to be contextual, that everything has to depend upon the context. Again, I don't know among you, but probably I was the oldest student as far as the organization which did this said. They said, certainly I'm the oldest student who took this course, but I really learned a lot. I enjoyed it. And even though I may not remember what I read, I'm officially certified as having done an advanced course on PubMed, Mendeley, etc., etc. I think this is very, very important, that a person who reviews an article, a person who's the editor of a journal, should also know what is it that the candidate is really doing. Most of the time, I think the candidates obviously know much more. This was a conference, editorial review board meeting I had just about 2 weeks ago. So I couldn't resist the temptation of putting this slide. Just look at the numbers. It speaks for itself. Source is PubMed, June 14th, just a month ago. In 2021, 136,793 papers have been published in PubMed index journals just dealing with COVID. Now look at telemedicine. 1970 to 1980, 1 decade, 26 papers. Next decade, 30. Next decade, 2011 to 2019, 23,000 papers. 26 months, 3,400 papers. You can see obviously that telemedicine, telehealth, etc. are going. From the first hospital on wheels which I showed you, today we have a 5G, no more VSATs, because we are now talking of internet. VSAT, the use of VSAT has become very, very restricted. So you can see what is happening. I would like to conclude with this slide. Maybe I have 2 more slides. This gives me an intense sense of happiness. I belong to the BC era. I'm not talking of before Corona, I'm talking of before computers. I was the last neurosurgeon in India to have qualified and trained before computers came into hospital. There was no CT scan when I qualified as a neurosurgeon. With having grown up in that background, just look at this. 10 below poverty limit farm laborers charter a bullock cart. Look at that innovation. They charter a bullock cart for a round trip of 200 rupees. For a journey of 25 kilometers from the deepest part of Amada, Gujarat, tribal area. The bullock cart guy earns 200 bucks in 3 hours, which is not bad money. And why is this important? These men who are on this bullock cart get the same consultation which is given to the urban elite living in Madras city who pay, I don't know how much, maybe 1,000, maybe 1,200 rupees for a consultation. The same doctor, the same with 0 rupee consultation fee on a big screen. He sees all these people and gives their opinion without making them wait for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 1 hour outside his consulting room. This is the University of Pittsburgh funded project, and the patients get even the medicines free. So this is the India. The India we live in is a paradox. On the one hand, we are talking of going to Mars. On the other hand, we still have people coming like this, but they come and get the state-of-the-art 2022 treatment. The last 2 slides I want to mention is that there is a need, and most of you will realize that in 10 years from now. I'm very happy that the Indian Institute of Science is embarking on a major project, a dual MD PhD program. The foundation stone has been laid. 2025, hospital will be ready. The first graduate will be 2032, but nevertheless it will come. IIT Kharagpur, they started a school of medical science 12 years ago, and MBBS students today have more than 100 of them have graduated. Every one of them have been given good jobs. They have a master's degree in medical sciences. IIT Kanpur is laying the foundation stone day after tomorrow to build the Gangwal Medical School, Science and Medical School, and MBBS course will be given, degree will be given by IIT Kanpur. So this, ladies and gentlemen, is the future. I would like to pay homage, whatever little, if I'm dabbling a absolute pseudo, trying to claim that I know I'm competent to give this lecture. I'm absolutely a disclaimer. As you say, before a talk is given, I need to give a disclaimer that I'm not a medical scientist, but I would like to pay homage to both two people. I have many teachers, but these two of them, Professor Kalyan Raman has been my, right from the day when I was a second year MBBS student, that was when I first got introduced to neurosurgery, till today, for the last 54 years, he has been my guru, friend, philosopher and guide. Professor Ramurthy, though I could work under him only for a few years, now he retired. Unfortunately, he had to retire when he was just 58 years old. He has been an outstanding influence to me, even though I did not directly work on him. And you can see Guru Purnima today. This is whom we respect for Guru Purnima. So research is to see what everybody else has seen and to think what nobody else has thought. If we, what did Albert Einstein say? If we knew where it was, what it was we were doing, it would not be called research, would it? I think it's very simple. If I knew the answer, why the hell should I spend my time? The answer is not important. One reason why probably I got my PhD without any problem was I wrote a full chapter. I said, if I'm the examiner, what would I do? So I wrote a full chapter on limitations of this thesis. What are all the bad things of this thesis? But I justify by saying this, and this. This was done in a government hospital setting, etc., etc., etc. So every possible question the examiner could ask, I anticipated and wrote that. It is important to get results from experiment, but it's still more important is the process of getting that results. Results do not matter at all. If you prove that something is not working, I think that is as good as to show that something is working. So finally, clinical research rocks. Thank you, everybody. I hope I didn't exceed the time. Yes, sir.
I've been just asked very quickly by our associate dean to give a few words of thanks to your excellent presentation, if you don't mind that.
No, sir.
So, Mr. Ganapathy, Dr. Ganapathy doesn't know, maybe not remember me. I met him actually at the meeting at Varanasi last November, just after COVID had dipped down, and had a conversation with him and his wife. And it's an amazing lecture. As a physician, for those of you who are not medical people here, we don't think surgeons think beyond a particular point. So we think surgeons are actually not thinkers, but doers actually. Whereas physicians are just exactly the opposite. Now he has proved that basically he is a different person altogether. And I'm always amazed by people, particularly from Madras. Ramurthy was a very good example, which he said, who can do so many things given the limited 24 hours we have in a day. And he has proved that not only could he operate on what is actually a difficult branch of surgery. I mean, very important to remember that in the brain, we don't know what is normal, what is abnormal. There is no plane to actually clearly define it. And so it is a very difficult branch of surgery. And also do research, introduce a new concept of telemedicine, and do his PhD on a very emerging thing at that time. I mean, it was very important to remember. I remember seeing the first CT scan when I was a postgraduate in Chipma. My professor of medicine, he was a neurologist. He brought and showed me the first scan when we were postgraduates, and it was amazing. We were doing carotid angiograms for every patient who came to the casualty, and we could see this subdural straight away on a scan and referred to the Madras Neurosurgery Institute. So I think it's important. I think it's a very good lecture, and I'm a little bit sad that there are not enough clinicians actually to listen to this, particularly from the younger people who are doing post-graduation, maybe the time of the day or this hybrid meeting business. Maybe there are more people who are online, but it's very important to remember that research actually gives you intellectual satisfaction. being a doctor, for those of you who are not doctors, after a bit of time becomes a rote process. You just keep doing the same thing. But doing research in addition, and I'm very passionate as a researcher, and doing research in addition, and I do laboratory research in addition to clinical, I think the distinction is blurred now. Is actually very important to do, and he has illustrated that beautifully. And I really enjoyed your talk, sir. It was a brilliant exposition of how you keep ahead of what is the curve, as you say. And thank you very much for a very illuminated lecture.
I think we have virtual audience, and I also noticed that our Dean Research, Dr. Kalpana Balakrishnan, has joined us. Madam, would you like to say a few words, please? Kalpana, ma'am, would you like to say a few words? Probably her mic is having an issue. Are there any questions from the virtual audience or from the in-person audience for Dr. Ganapathy? Are there any questions from our in-person audience or any comments?
How many medical people are
there? Vidya, I have a question and a comment also.
There are other clinicians we have few other clinicians though. We have some comments on the chat box. Dr. Sandhya Sutharam has expressed her thanks.
Can I ask a question, Vidya? Vidya, I have a question also.
She enjoyed it. And we have Dr. Archana who says it was really motivating and she enjoyed the talk thoroughly today.
Thank you, Dr. Archana, for your comments. Thank you very much.
Vidya, can I just ask a question? Dr. Vidya, can you hear me?
No. Dr. Sandhya, would you like to unmute?
Yeah, I'm unmute.
Okay.
Can you hear me? No?
Yeah. We're not able to hear you on the...
Okay, you're not able to hear me, but I'm unmuted only. Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna put you on the speaker so you can ask your question.
Yeah.
Madam, you can ask your question, madam.
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much, sir. That was a very excellent lecture and so motivating. My only question is, sir, how do you balance your clinical work and research? All the ideas just, when it comes to patient care, many of the ideas just disappear. And how did you do this wonderful balance of both? It's my personal question.
Thank you very much, madam, for that very nice question. I was just telling Dr. Vidya 2 hours ago that to balance this, you require enormous, I repeat, enormous in size 24 font or 36 font support at home. And my wife has been my honorary unpaid secretary for 47 years now. So she does literature search, she does my PPT presentations, and she looked after my father and mother when they were alive, etc. So I think this is what is important, because as you know, particularly as a neurosurgeon, particularly 10, 20, 30 years ago when mortality was very high, it used to be so depressing when 15% of the people whom you operate die, 15% die even before they come to, etc., etc. So you are absolutely right. It is difficult to achieve a balance, but my philosophy from the very beginning was a little of everything. That is why I never was
what one would call a successful practitioner. I never, like my colleagues, my students and my students all see patients till 11 o'clock at night. I never did that. I had 2 or 3 patients. Okay, enough patients to make a comfortable living. That's about all. So I would spend, somehow I got a kick out of presenting papers and writing papers and seeing. I mean, it's a false sense of ego. Now with my white hair, at the age of 71, your perspective becomes totally different. But when you're 50, 55, you get a big kick when there are 100 people. Those days there was no COVID. So there were, when 100 people are in front of you and they listen to you, that used to be my motivating factor, not seeing 20 patients waiting in my clinic to see me. So it's ultimately it's what you want. And I wanted a little of everything. And I think I've been able to get a little of everything.
Thank you so much, sir. That was wonderful. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
So it seems probably if you're unmuting that side, we're not hearing it in the auditorium here. So if there is someone,
Okay.
I'm now holding a phone to the mic. So if anybody else has a question, you can unmute and speak, and I will be able to put this through the speakers.
I think there is a question in the chat box, Vidya. Just see.
Uh, is it unmuted here? Because this is shut down here. Okay, there's a message. There's a question from Dr. Archana. Is it possible to do research in an area you are passionate about, completely different from your area of your expertise?
Yeah, I'm just trying to. It's a very, very complicated question for a simpleton like me. Let me give me a minute to understand. Is it possible to do research in an area you're passionate about, completely different from your area of your expertise? Very good question. Excellent question. And I think you have answered that question yourself. If you are really passionate about something, nothing will stand in your way, should stand in your way. Nothing is impossible. The present generation has proved that the sky is no longer the limit. When I was a postgraduate, I was told, enthused by my teachers, saying, look, the sky is no longer the limit. The sky is the limit, sorry. I was told at that time, the sky is the limit, meaning you don't confine yourself to the ground, go right up to the sky. Today, even the sky is no longer the limit. We are talking, so absolutely right. And if I may divert a little, the success of IIT graduates all over the world. I mean, whether you are a Google CEO or whether you are the CEO of a dozen of the multinational companies, having studied mechanical engineering in IIT, you end up as CEO of Citibank. Having studied aeronautical engineering, you end up as CEO of McDonald's. I think this proves the point, which is what I strongly believe in. And though my grandchildren think I'm gone totally off my head, Madam, I'm confident that today, if I have 6 months, if I put my heart and soul into it, I'm very confident in 1 year, I can become a chartered accountant. In 1 year, I can become a lawyer. In 1 year, I can become whatever it is, whatever it is. Meaning that you have learned how to learn. And I think that is what IIT teaches you. Once you learn how to separate the chaff from the wood, how to do that, I don't think it's difficult at all to branch into a totally new area now, so depending on how passionate you are. So the other way about, if you are not able to do research in an area which is not your expertise, you are obviously not passionate about it. I hope you understand the point. If you are not able to do research, if I am not able to do research today on yoga or mathematics, obviously I'm not passionate about it. If I was passionate about it, I would start from the very beginning.
Dr. Archana, hope you were able to. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your participation today. We all want to thank you once again, sir, for your presence here today and for this wonderful talk. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.